Right, so tonight Green Party peer Natalie Bennett is bringing another fatal motion in the Lords, as the Greens did earlier this year, to kill off more Tory legislation, anti-strike legislation, that will force public sector workers to work against their will, to maintain so-called safe service levels. In other words, they're going to force people to work to maintain a level of service that minimises disruption, which is the very point of taking strike action. It is a protected human right to be able to withdraw your labour, to be free of slavery, in effect, because being forced to work is tantamount to that. Therefore, what they are doing here is almost certainly illegal and would never stand up in court if passed. But passed through the Lords, it may well do, because whilst the Greens, once more, are the ones leading the fight against the Tories, are the architects of the second fatal motion we've seen just this year. Previously, it was over the Public Order Bill, of course, and our rights to protest. And prior to that, we hadn't seen one of these since 2016 because they are so rare. Yet so rancid are the current Tory party that they now face another for forcing people to work against their will. And worse, both Sir Keir Starmer and Sir Ed Davey, leaders of Labour and the Lib Dems respectively, have ordered their peers to abstain over this. Labour, the party of workers, now refusing to stand up for you as you get forced to work or face the sack. How far they have fallen. Right, so once more it is one of the just two Green peers in the House of Lords who are standing up for decency, the basics like our human rights, as every other party seems intent on stripping us of them, or standing by as casual observers. But when Labour are once again being told to abstain over this by what passes for their leader, people need to look up and take notice that this is not a party that is on your side. This is all down to the Tories' anti-strike legislation, their strikes minimum service levels bill, and it is really bad news. Not only does this limit the scope of workers and their rights to withdraw their labour in order to basically completely undermine the strike action entirely, since disruption is the whole point, it's the last resort, but as we've seen with the Tories repeatedly, they don't listen and they don't negotiate. They ignore, or they bully, or they impose their will anyway, and this is what they're doing again here. If this passes, you going on strike in violation of minimum service levels could result in you being sacked. Not only that, but the trade union representing you could be in significant bother as well, since if it does not enforce the terms of the minimum service levels bill, they could find themselves liable for damages for up to £1 million. That has the potential to bankrupt some of our smaller representative workers' bodies, but also turns those who are supposed to be on our side into enforcement agents for the government instead. Would you be too keen to remain a member of a union that was doing that? That's not what we pay our dues for, is it? I look at it this way. If people are going to be sacked for not going to work in jobs there are clear shortages in, such as healthcare, where are you replacing the staff from? Just how badly do the Tories want to wreck our healthcare? And then you realise, well, they really don't care if they do. They don't care if they can't replace staff. If the NHS were to go under, they'll just blame doctors and nurses and the unions, and their loyal media will say the same, and then the way is paved for a mass privatised health service. What you expect is the party of the trade unions to stand by their trade unions, though, but instead the Red Tory waste-of-space Labour Party, they used to stand up for working people before it decided to just be a pathetic Tory tribute act, once again, saying it'll be sitting on its hands. This is a fundamental issue for Labour and a day of reckoning for them. If they, as the Labour Party, cannot stand up and back the Greens on this, of all things, along with the Lib Dems too, who are being just as pathetic, but who stand for God knows what, frankly, pointless party, then Labour are incapable of even standing up for a basic tenet of human rights, effectively abandoning Article 4 of the Human Rights Convention. And do remember, Keir Starmer is supposed to be a former human rights lawyer. Labour literally abandoning Article 4, which governs not only your right to be free of slavery, but your right not to do forced or compulsory labour. Literally, the wording of Article 4 on this particular aspect states, forced or compulsory labour means you are forced to do work that you have not agreed to under the threat of punishment. That is exactly what this is. Well, if this passes, the Tories will see you sacked for not maintaining a minimum service level. It is a human rights violation to punish people in any way for withdrawing their labour. What the Tories are attempting here, therefore, is just plain illegal. If this bill passes into law, a court case will almost certainly rule it illegal. So why the heck Labour and the Lib Dems are pushing their peers to abstain on this is just nuts. There is no political capital to be made here. They'll look like mugs for not only siding with the Tories, but siding against workers, and they'll figure it'll work out for them because people don't want their routines being disturbed. They figure people will back it because they are sick of train delays, sick of backlogs in healthcare. Not the fault of strikes, but the fault of governmental mismanagement. It won't get sold to them that way, though. That won't be the narrative they're given. We've already had our right to protest slashed because Labour wouldn't support the Greens then. Now our right to withdraw Labour is under the same threat, and Labour are saying they'll repeat that abstention again and let the Tories have their way. This is stripping some people of their right to strike, to force some people to work against their will under threat of punishment. Just think about that. Think how you would feel if this was you, if you aren't being affected. Did you stand on a doorstep bashing your pots and pans for the NHS, and now you're going to sit back and watch them lose their right to strike? Well, you basically are if you're backing the Tories pushing this, or one of the abstainer parties here. I dare say some peers from those parties will rebel, but not enough to matter, as was shown back in June with the anti-protest bill. Teachers, border staff, doctors, nurses, train drivers, firefighters and more will be sacked if they don't undermine their own industrial action. If the unions don't enforce that, and at this point in time there are just 2 Green Party peers in the House of Lords to stand up against that. It is a joke, a farce. This isn't a government, this is a dictatorship. Erosion of our rights at work, a clampdown. Do you want these people sacked because they aren't getting the stuff they need to do their jobs? Because that's why they're going on strike most of the time. Because their jobs aren't safe? Aren't getting paid for what they deserve for the role in society that they play looking after all of us? Or do you support them in getting that? Demand your representatives do better if you do. Take your vote elsewhere if the party you're backing isn't standing up for them. Because if it isn't you getting abandoned today, it could be you tomorrow. Sunak is pretending other countries have all this. He says it all the time to try and normalise what he's doing. But he's lying. It isn't true. And this unelected political pygmy, literally as well as figuratively, is a liar because other countries aren't trying to rip up human rights quite like he is. A fatal motion is literally the last resort in the House of Lords. It is the big red button on the wall. It can kill off legislation completely if pressed. And this sick joke of a bill has to die. Green Party peer Natalie Bennett's fatal motion reads, rejected because it continues decades of attacks against trade unions and workers' rights, exposes trade unions to being liable to pay damages of up to £1 million, forces trade unions to act as enforcement agents on behalf of employers and the government, is likely to prohibit more than 40% of rail industry workers from taking part in strike action, and fails to ensure that rail services will be safe for rail workers on strike days. Right now, this is being implemented as an excuse to bring rail unions to heel, but the wording of the Tories bill means all public sector workers get affected by it. If more than 40% of staff are needed as a minimum, then strike action on their part will not really affect anyone, therefore completely undermining the industrial action. It would render going on strike functionally pointless. You might lose a few drivers of a day, for example, but signal operators, they're essential. They will probably never be permitted to go on strike. Anti-trade union legislation has just become harder and harder and never gets repealed by successive governments. Blair said he would do it, he didn't. Starmer is saying he will do some of it. You believe that, you'll believe anything. This is only a few steps away from rendering our trade unions utterly toothless, and the party formed by them are going to sit on their hands over this. Affiliated trade unions to the Labour Party, I have to say, what the hell are you thinking? If Labour peers abstain on this as instructed, you should all be pulling your funding as of tonight. Why fund a party that isn't standing up for you or your members? God knows we know the Tories want to bin human rights laws anyway. They stop them being as heartless and cruel as they actually want to be. But what does it say of the red Tories opposite that they won't stand against that? If you're not with us, you're against us. That's right, isn't it? Labour excused themselves earlier in the year by saying Labour doesn't vote to kill bills in the Lords. That's the Commons' job. Except it isn't true, and the fatal motion option exists in the Lords for a good bloody reason, like this. Instead of making excuses, and I firmly believe they will repeat this excuse they made last June at the other fatal motion, they could get on board with it and do what needs to be done for the good of the nation rather than upholding a nonsense stance. They argue that the Tory majority in the Lords means they could do likewise to Labour legislation, but this is also a nonsense because the Tories do not have a majority in the House of Lords. They do have a majority in the Commons though, so Labour can kill a bad bill in the Lords far more easily than they can in the Commons. What they are doing is making pathetic excuses. If Labour maintains this farce of a position, which just lets the Tories do what they like, stops the House of Lords functioning as the check it should be, then seriously, people, you need to ask yourselves what is the point of them, and what will they do empower themselves if they won't even stand up for rights at work as the Workers' Party? Well, they aren't the Workers' Party, not anymore. They've long abandoned that. The Green Party are proving they are. The unions should take their funding their way and stop propping up Starmer's red Tories, and we definitely should stop handing them our votes. They do nothing to earn them. Best of luck to Natalie Bennett tonight. Solidarity to her and the Green Party for this. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Please do have your say on this story in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation on the fatal motion back in June, which the other Green peer, Jenny Jones, pushed, and Labour's excuses then. I expect they'll be the same tonight, and I will hopefully catch you up on the next vid. Cheers, folks.